I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please, Secretary, call the roll.
Director Carr.
Present.
Director Garcia.
Present.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Present.
Director Herndon.
Present.
Director Leonard.
Present.
Director O'Halloran.
Here.
Director Seamson has notified our office that she'll be running late for tonight's meeting. Vice President Taylor.
In attendance.
And President Peterson.
Present.
We have 8 present.
Okay, I'll now ask the Secretary to lead us in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. Members, please mute your devices.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're going to start this meeting off a little differently than usual, and I'll explain why, and then we'll proceed. I'm going to read a land acknowledgement, which serves the district in acknowledging the indigenous people and ancestors who once lived in harmony with land and water where we now live. We acknowledge that the Milwaukee lies on traditional Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk homeland, along with the southwest shores of Lake Michigan, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes. On this site, the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Connecticut rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's Menominee, Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, Oneida, and Mohican sovereign nations remain present to this day. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta Escolar de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799. E introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Gracias. Pursuant to Board Rule 1.06, this meeting is being conducted virtually. However, board members are on the stage at the Central Service Building. In order to allow as much public participation as possible, this meeting is being broadcast on radio station WYMS 88.9 FM, via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we move to our agenda, the chair will ask that we share in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of the following members of the MPS community. Gwendolyn Banks, a retired teacher from Hampton School. David Christensen, a retired teacher from Marshall High School. Sandra Hardy, a retired safety assistant with the district. Emily Jones, a retired educational assistant from Madison High School. Gloria McGee, a retired secretary with the Department of Transportation. Arlene Skarowski, a retired teacher from North Division High School. Nick Prusu, a student at Gwen T. Jackson School. I also asked people keep in mind their thoughts, the American service people and the Afghani people who were killed today. Please, a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now move on to the items of business on our agenda. As is customary, no public testimony is taken at board meetings. For our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting esb.milwaukee.k12.wi.us. So let us begin. Madam Secretary, what is our first item of business?
The first First item of business on tonight's agenda is action on the minutes of the July 2021 regular meeting of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Are there no objections? If there are no objections from the board, I will ask that we defer approval of the minutes until the end of the agenda.
So noted.
Okay. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the superintendent?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have one report from the superintendent, and that is the monthly report from the superintendent of schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the superintendent please present the report?
Good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. I would like to begin my report by focusing in on ringing in the 2021-22 school year as we welcome our students on the early start calendar. We gathered at McDowell Montessori on August 16th and wished our students well as they walked the red carpet into the building on their first day back. Thank you to the many individuals who joined us, including parents, board members, elected officials, the MTEA, and our community partners. We're looking forward to doing it all over again for our students on the traditional start calendar. The enrollment for the early start school is 28,710. We are expecting 45,553 additional students for our traditional start schools, of which is a grand total of 74,263 students. Given the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, there was even more preparation and participation for the start of the 2021-22 school year than usual. A shout out goes out to all of our district offices for going above and beyond to communicate the importance of information on resources to families such as vaccines, clinics, transportation services, athletics, and enrollment activities. Staff from a variety of areas supported the following as example of these efforts. Collaboration with the Milwaukee Health Department to hold back-to-school fairs, which included vaccines opportunities at Obama SCTE and the Southside Health Center. Community vaccine sites were opened earlier in the summer at North Division, South Division, and Roosevelt Creative Arts Middle School. Our 2021 Freshman Bridge program had 1,864 fresh persons participate in the academic and socio-emotional learning activities to help them prepare for high school. Canvassing efforts to facilitate outreach and communications to families throughout Milwaukee with the objective of enrolling students in Milwaukee Public Schools. The district onboarded and welcomed 105 MPS teachers for the Early Start New Educator Institute and another 145 for the Traditional Start New Educator Institutes. Efforts by Human Resources to fully staff our schools included a strong presence in over 20 community events seeking to recruit teachers and staff. MPS returns to the classroom family guide developed to help families get ready for school. At this time, I will ask David Solifaferic to provide an update on transportation services for the Milwaukee Public Schools. David.
President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik-Pfeifferich, Director of Business and Transportation Services. At this point, I'd like to talk through kind of our preparation plan for both the traditional starts, which will be obviously starting in the next week or so, and the progress that we've made since the first day of our early start calendar. We're feverishly routing any last-minute changes that we have for these traditional start schools. We expect to have approximately 650 buses worth of needs in an extremely tight packaging of our buses. Right now, with essentially the second-tier schools all starting, right? So all the high schools have started. They're the middle tier of all of our buses. We have approximately 600 buses running with a need of about 650. So we're short. So I'll just be blunt about it. We're short on our bus needs at the moment. When we contracted out at the March in anticipation of the early start, For August, we had contracted for 850 buses. So between March and August 16th, our office has effectively canceled 200 buses worth of services, and that's 3 tiers, not 200 routes. So that's each bus has 3 tiers, and so we've worked extremely hard. That has translated to mitigating a large chunk of the challenge, but we're not quite over the hump. And so there's a lot of questions that come with that, obviously. The first question that I will address is that in the last week, we went from, in the last week, we had I did a news collaboration with the companies to try to get out the message that we want more drivers and that anybody who's looking for employment to obviously solicit those companies to employ. We were, at that time, about 100 buses short on that first day, so we canceled 60 buses worth of work to get us to the place that we're at. And effectively, right now, it looks like we're impacting about, on an average day, about 400 students from a variety of schools. That is being combated, obviously, with stranded service, things of that nature, to make sure that if we have a student that has not been picked up, that we find a means to get them to and from. The vast majority of these students, obviously, are at the high school level, so we have supplemented our efforts by doing distributions to schools for bus tickets for any particular student that would be stranded at the school. I do want to report, though, that part of the challenge has to do with effectively the rate of call-offs for the first 2 weeks at the bus company level versus the rate of new hires. And so we see in some, so like per 100 buses, it seems like we're getting about a 16% absentee rate, between 16 and 20% absentee rate at these bus companies. A lot of that has to do with a variety of factors, some of which where they may have children that have not quite started yet, and we anticipate that in September, a batch of drivers will be coming back that would have otherwise not started or might have contributed to a driver not coming in on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. So I don't anticipate that the problem is going to get much larger than where it's at. It will, because again, every one of the buses that we need are already running for the most part. Until we actually get buses on the road on Thursday of next week, it's going to be hard to see how well our timing has become, because of course, as we take a system that is designed for 800 plus buses and make it 650 or less, it's just cutting into our ability to be of very high quality, right? And so we really are trying to get to the corner now, get to the next stop. There's no waiting for kids to run down the block, things like that, and that we try to build that into the system, obviously, to make sure that we're not rushing everywhere. You know, we want to be safe and provide quality services and make sure that kids aren't left stranded. So we have we've got a tight ship, but we are making do actually quite well given the circumstances. Part of the challenge that we see is that, and I'll just use the per 100 bus operation because every contractor is a little bit different. It appears as if between 5 and 10 new drivers will come out of an operation at a terminal of 100 plus. So per 100 bus contract, we get about 5 new drivers per week on a good week. And that's because of some of the stringent regs that we have with in relationship to training and CDL and all of that. Some of it has to do with the things that we've discussed in the past. People just are still a little bit uncomfortable coming back into the market. And some of it has to do with September, right? And so there's some factors that are outside of our control that have to do with unemployment, compensation, and the ability to continue to get an extended benefit level that may compensate them better than driving a bus for the week would. That is set to expire in September for, I think, the vast majority of the area. So, of course, that is also going to have a positive impact, I think, on recruitment and or return to duty. So while there's a ton of factors that are coming into place, I think they're between now and let's just say Tuesday of next week, we continue to try to find efficiencies in the model, and so that we don't have a lot of situations where families don't have a means of transportation. Part of our strategy is to make sure that we are communicating as effectively as possible, so that if somebody is standing on a corner, that we try to make sure that they know prior to mom or dad going to work that there is a challenge, right? So that we can make accommodations, so that schools know on the back end of the process kind of what we're going to do to get those students back home. And so we have an automated or an electronic notification system that we are trying to send out each and every morning by 7 o'clock. And it's obviously going to have to get pushed earlier as the first tier, which is the good chunk of elementary schools that'll be starting on September 2nd, will be effectively starting by 6:30. So the goal is to identify the buses, if there are any, that have a service-related issue, and notify those families before their corner stop is to be serviced. So I think we do have a good strategy with respects to that. Obviously, the goal is to get to a place where that communication is not necessary. While there's challenges, I do want to, I guess I want to present hope, right? I don't want to present this idea that we're not going to effectively address the situation. I do think that it will get addressed. I think we've stabilized in terms of drivers who decided they weren't cut out for the market and moved on, right? So all of those drivers that wanted to stay, they're now in week number 3. They're going to be here, right? So I don't anticipate a whole lot of call-offs above and beyond things like being sick, their child is sick, things of that nature. But we do have a high percentage of call-offs at the moment, and that's something that we're just going to have to tackle systematically. I do want to maybe pivot a little bit to county transit. So I know there's been questions about how we are blending the mix of yellow bus versus county transit. I think to date, and I was to bring back to the board some numbers, we had 356 appeals to date. Again, right now, we're transporting over 15,000 students, so that's just to give perspective in terms of what the appeals look like relative to who we're busing right now. Come September 2nd, we're going to bus about 42,000 kids, roughly. So to date, we have 356 appeals. 34 of those were not related to high schools at all. So there are people who are anticipating, an eligibility issue, or they're too close, so they don't feel like they should walk, things like of that nature, or they maybe want door to door as opposed to a corner stop. 40 at the high school level were not related to county transit, a little over 40. I have 40 plus here. So they may have, again, been too close for transportation and feel as if they need transportation. 87 of them were approved, and so that leaves roughly about 200 appeals that are on, I guess, what we call hold. They haven't been declined, but given the state of our bus count, we have yet to actually transition them from a county transit bus pass to a yellow bus if they have appealed. So obviously, I don't want to put them on a bus that's not going to show up. So that's part of the challenge. I will note that we have had very, very few. I don't even think I've taken a single call about service-related issues with county transit. And so all of our calls have been pertaining to, I don't want to use the service, not that the service is not adequate or coming. Obviously, the county transit system is dealing with their own shortage. It was reported in the news. That has not had an impact on us at all, as a matter of fact. So I'm happy to report that has just not been a factor for us. I will state, and then obviously if there's anything else that I need to follow up with, this is not a local issue. It's not a regional issue. It's a national issue. It's a very significant national issue. So it is. It's something that we're all dealing with, and I think, and I'll be blunt, I do honestly think that we are in a much better position than many, many districts. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to save face or anything. It's a fact. We moved from 2-tier to 3-tier, did a lot to help our system out. We did kind of pivot a little bit to county transit. That helped us provide some services. If that was not the service that they wanted, obviously that's a different story, but it did provide a means to school. And so we are at a position where we're functioning, and I'm not happy to report 400 kids out of 15,000. That is not something that I'm proud of. And I do anticipate next week we'll have some challenges, but I do think we will, between week 1 and let's just say the end of week 2, recover to a place where it is not crisis mode. It's a nuisance. It's things that we need to try to figure out, but it is not like the vast majority of kids not being serviced. So I hope that that's translating properly, that we're not in a position where some districts where they just don't have options and they don't have solutions. I think we've got a toolbox that we're utilizing, and I do think that we were a little bit ahead of the game in some respects to pivot in areas where some districts just didn't have the opportunity. At this point, obviously, I take any questions that you might have.
Okay, Dr. Posley, is that complete your presentation?
I just have a couple of other items, and we can have you design.
Okay. So why don't we take transportation questions first, then we'll complete your, is that okay? Okay, Director Taylor, Vice President Taylor.
Thank you. And thank you for that report. I know with transportation, it has definitely been a challenge. I've called about some myself. So just thinking that we're going into traditional and we'll have maybe 2 times as many students coming back. So I know for early start that Friday, because I'm a parent, we all got texts about a route change. But within the text, we didn't get a route number or the time. So I just want to know, how do we circumvent that for traditional so that we don't have that issue? And it came Friday night, like after 5 p.m. So nobody's at central office, nobody's at the bus company, and your student starts back school, your baby, on Monday. And then on Monday, I did get the information, I'm just saying as a parent, but I got it at 1 p.m. And so my child was already to begin to school at 1 p.m. So I just want to know, how do we circumvent that for traditional, not just for my baby, but for all of the students, so we won't have that issue going with over 42,000 people.
Administration.
Director Taylor, President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Fife Eric, Director of Business Transportation. That was a blurb on the radar. So that was the first time we used that system for a communication. It was identified over the weekend. The plan was actually to send out a revised communication over the weekend. Unfortunately, we needed the third-party programmer to fix the blurb. So I'll give you my personal guarantee that that's not going to happen this time around, because we fixed the issue. And so we do plan on sending the traditional postcards that we send out, and then we're going to supplement that with our change system. And I'll be happy to report, since that first day, we've sent out a number of changes, both communications, both through the change model and the delay model, to kind of refine the practice. So yeah, I absolutely apologize that happened. That will not happen again.
Thank you. Any other, yes, Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. And I did want to note that I noticed today, well, in the Wheeler report, that, Northwoods, there's a headline, schools are grappling with school bus driver shortage. Madison School District shifts student schedules to accommodate for bus driver shortage. And so I do want to note that this is not just a Milwaukee issue. And so I sent it probably pretty late, so I don't think that you would have had time to react to it yet. But I think in Pittsburgh, they are running a Release Your Seat program where they're paying parents who have the ability to transport their student. Is that something which would free up? I don't know if that would be a tool that we would be able to use in our situation, because I don't know. I understand you're the subject matter expert on this, so I don't know if that tool would be effective for us. But is that something we can consider going forward if we have any issues that persist?
Administration.
Director O'Halloran, President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Fife Eric, absolutely. And I'm very familiar with that model. We do employ that model to some degree with private school reimbursement. And so we are actively, actually, for people that aren't aware, we have a responsibility to transport students that are not attending Milwaukee Public Schools as well. And as part of that responsibility, there are opportunities to do something other than a yellow bus if it becomes cost prohibitive by state law. So it is an option in the toolbox. The challenge with that is typically we don't would not pay out till the end of the year, because we would then obviously, well, there's two parts to that. The first part is certainly don't want to give a stipend of money and have the student still not come to school. That's the first problem. And then obviously we only want to pay for, retroactively for the days that they do attend. So I don't know that it helps on the front end unless families are able to, front the bill on their end first. But it is absolutely something in the toolbox that I believe can be used. I would probably want to make sure that we vetted that with the city attorney to discuss some of those nuances that Milwaukee, as a city of the first class, has when you're doing something other, when you have common carriers. So there's just some stickiness with those statutes.
Thank you. And I recognize I kind of sprung that on you last minute, so I understand. I just wanted to bring it up to see if I had any reactions. So can you just tell us once again how many drivers you think we're short? And also, since you did bring it up, do you know how many bus drivers we're using to transport private students to the private schools?
Director O'Halloran, President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Pfeifferich. Right now, I would say it's a kind of a hard number to say. In an optimal states, we really need about 800 plus buses. That's optimal. That's to allow for all of the things that happen, homeless, McKinney-Vento, special ed address changes that we don't know yet, as the bulk of schools haven't started yet. So given that we're at 650, I think that we have 600 drivers, like I said, right now, actively running routes. 650 is what we really, really need to just get by. And I think that once traditional schools start, that number may elevate a little bit to just, under 700. But again, now we're talking about, we're also elevating some of the driver pool that did not come back in August. And so we hope that that's going to kind of offset that. And we are currently now consolidating, and there's still opportunities. That's the way that I'll put it. So I think we're going to hover around 650 in the short term. And, it might put a hold on some of those appeals and so some of those exceptions that typically in years past we would have accommodated, and it might slow down some of the processing power of the office, because it's not as easy to accommodate address changes. And it gets rather complicated because we bus not only to houses, we bus to daycares and all of these other alternate addresses that we don't guarantee, but obviously try to accommodate to the best of our ability. So I do think the easy answer is that we need to be at 650 minimum. That's kind of where we're at. With respects to private schools, that's an interesting conversation. We have seen effectively that Milwaukee Public Schools employs really three mechanisms. It's going to be a parent contract, a primary contract, or a yellow bus contract. The vast majority of our services employed to private schools are in the first two, parent contract, primary contract. And what that means is that we give the parent money under a parent contract, or we give the school money to provide services at no cost to the parent under a primary contract. The third option is we provide the yellow bus directly. And again, it has to do, when we can do one versus the other has to do with state statute and our cost versus their cost. What we've seen is that, so to answer that question, right now we have probably about 10 buses operating on yellow bus contract right now. And that's, not many of them start when we start, so that's part of the conundrum. The other half is, I think, private schools like to take the money if they can, and then employ drivers either to be a cook and then also drive, to pool their money with other districts if they're in the fringe of Wauwatosa, West Dallas, and Milwaukee, and they can take a bus and they can just circle in that area and take our money, take their money, and do something creative there. So a lot of schools historically had done what we call primary contracts. About 50-50 split would do that. So I'd say about 50 schools would have done parent contracts and about 50 primary contracts in a typical year. What we've seen is that right now, private schools can't get contracts with bus companies. So we've virtually seen almost all of them, and I'd have to go back and report back out if this is necessary, shift from a primary contract to a parent contract because they just can't get buses. And contractors, if they're going to choose, they're going to choose the $1 million contract with MPS over the $30,000 contract with, for one bus or $40,000 for that private school. So we have a little bit of a competitive advantage in that respect. So it is beneficial for us to obviously maintain those relationships in that regard. And so I really think that it's going to be very, very difficult for these private schools unless they're providing an in-house solution to do any busing at all. I mean, that's just my honest opinion on the matter.
Thank you. Any other questions from, yes, Director Herndon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to bring up again, and I've spoken to you a couple times this week about the far northwest side of District 1 having limited city bus transportation. Have you had any resolutions that you've put together at this point?
Administration.
Director Herndon, President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Fife Herrick. We are continuing to prioritize areas of, I guess, what I'll call limited service. I mean, obviously, we put buses in areas where we know that there are issues with service. Some of the discussion, and this is where the appeal comes into play, is families maybe are in a lot of respects unfamiliar with how to get from point A to point B, and it just wasn't maybe prepared for that. So a lot of what we're trying to do is, I don't say counsel, but try to guide them on effective transportation options. Of course, we're putting buses wherever we can. That includes the far northwest side, but there, as it kind of alluded to in the appeals, there's been some limitations with transitioning too many kids from county transit to yellow bus. But we absolutely have been prioritizing areas where we have identified service-related challenges. And so that would equate to, hey, it's coming every half an hour, or I got to walk 8-9 blocks to get to the first pickup point on a county transit stop. So it's hard to quantify exactly how many came from the northwest side versus other areas of town, but I do know that our transition into county transit did hit schools like Riverside on the far northwest side differently than it did schools like Vincent that are positioned on the far northwest side. So it depends on what school that they're attending, because a lot of it had to do with density. But we did add routes, and actually we had planned for some of those situations prior to the school year. Obviously, I could come back if you've got specific schools that you're looking to drill down on and get information. But we have put buses and accommodated a significant amount of them on the northwest side of town.
Herndon, a follow-up?
Yes. Specifically, the two where I had the most contacts were Milwaukee High School of the Arts and Golda Meir.
Director Herndon, President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Fife Herrick. I would absolutely be glad either to provide a report that kind of details how many kids that we still have on county transit. Some of them are directly on county transit paths, and I talked at length, I think, with Director Herndon about a couple of situations where I think we have options, but families are uncomfortable, and then some where there's just some issues with accessibility. And in those instances, when we've identified issues of accessibility, we absolutely did make accommodations. And Gold is one of those that is a little bit easier to accommodate because they have their elementary school grades with buses. And so one of the strategies that we used in particular for Golda was the combination where in past years we had kept them separate. The high school buses and the elementary school buses were separate. Well, we combined them specifically to assist with those areas of town where we had challenges. So I know that was one of the strategies that we utilized to address that northwest side of town for Golda.
I'd like to pass the gavel to Vice President Taylor.
So noted.
First of all, I just want to...
Peterson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to thank you, David, for your hard work, and I hope your health is sustaining itself. it's quite the challenges we face. I had one other school I'd like you to look at. You mentioned it was Riverside. Specifically, what I'm interested in is I know that they have a bilingual Spanish program at Riverside, and some of the kids live beyond the 7 Mile on the northwest side, and I'd like it. I assume some of those students might be in the 200 group in limbo, but I just want to call everybody's attention that a bilingual program is a specific program that we should prioritize in terms of transportation. So if you could comment on that, and then I have one last thing.
Administration. Okay.
President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Phi Ferrick. Dr. Posey brought to my attention something else that I failed to mention, which is very much related. We've basically quadrupled our small fleet, and so I wanted to bring that up, not because that solved the problem, but what it does do is for program-specific type issues where you have a very unique program across town, and that is your program. That's where we've been prioritizing the small fleet. It's typically four students or less in a non-yellow bus alternative. And so bilingual, ESL, homeless, things of that nature are usually the priorities in that regard, because it does give us a little bit more flexibility where you would otherwise have a very low density alternative, and you don't certainly want to have a big yellow bus for 5 kids. And so we are over 100 vehicles in this model, and that's unheard of. I guess 4 years ago we were struggling to get 20 to 30 of them here, so we have really diversified, and that's kind of the mantra that we try to continue to use here, is that yellow bus is the preferred method in a lot of respects for a lot of reasons, and we will continue to use that model as much as possible. But in these times, specifically as a stopgap, we're trying to be creative and find safe alternatives. And I'll point out they're contracted with the district. They obviously have the same requirements for criminal background checks and drug testing and vetting from a criminal or driver record and everything else that we would expect of anybody to be in front of our young ones. But it really has helped. And, we did some news articles on that, and, some companies will call them care drivers, and they're very, in a lot of respects, they're much more detail-oriented and give very specific kind of services for families that have very specific needs. And so that has been one of the solutions that we've used. To get back to the Riverside situation, they have still a lot of buses, and so they're positioned in the middle of the city, so it has been easier for us to accommodate exceptions because they are kind of like parallel with I-94, just a little bit further north, whereas if you're really far south or really far north, it becomes hard to get all the way across town. And so Riverside does have a lot of kids on county transit. I'll point out that they have, 4 or 5 years ago, they had about half of their population on county transit, so they're very familiar with that model. It's unfortunate that we had to pivot back in that direction and then get people comfortable with that line of service, but it has been helpful for us, and we continue to make those exceptions for bilingual, ESL, homeless, using those white fleet and our yellow buses and things of that nature.
Director Peterson.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. The last thing I just want, maybe you could tell the public, people, it's not for the lack or a low wage that we're not recruiting bus drivers. I was impressed that some of the wages that they were getting, and well-deserved. It's a job that's very difficult, and but if you could just comment on that.
Administration.
President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Phi Ferrick. Wages right now have reached $23, $24 an hour, and that's an hourly wage. And so these companies have employed a number of strategies that they try to attract. Some of them are up to $3,000 bonuses for drivers just to walk in the door and stay 60 days. So it is, to your point, it is a relatively good paying job. It is very flexible. So I don't want to market necessarily too much for the for the listening audience, but if there is an opportunity to do that now, would be it's a good opportunity for somebody, especially if they may only want to work in the morning or may only want to work in the afternoon, to take a morning run or just an afternoon run and then go back home. But it is, these wages have gone up significantly across the United States, but even in the region in the past 5 years. And I think that bodes well, hopefully, in the long term to retaining or attracting new drivers. And so I that's one of the reasons why I'm hopeful that we're going to really stabilize relatively quickly once people are confident that, hey, we're back in business, school's open, we're going to make this work, and the rest of the other factors, unemployment benefits and some of that, start to taper off a little bit and allow people an opportunity to get back into the workforce.
Madam Chair? Yes. For our listening audience, Director Simpson has joined the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Passing of the gavel back.
So noted.
Any other comments from the Director Gogol-Gandhi, and then we'll move to the other side.
I would just like to also comment on Golda Meir and Riverside. If we can get a report, I'm curious to even know when you were talking about the prior, when children used to take the city bus and what that transitioned to and what the needs are now, because I've gotten a lot of communication around those two schools specifically as well.
Administration?
Director Gogol-Gandhi, President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Five Eric, I'd be glad to do that, and I can bring that back as soon, either via communication to governance, if you'd like just a report out, or if I need to bring back some official communication at another committee or board meeting, I'd be glad to do that.
Bring it back to board governance. That'll be fine. Dr. Simpson.
Thank you. I was listening, first apologies for running late, but I was listening in. I don't think this has been asked yet, but if it has, I apologize. So I've also been hearing from families at MSL, and one of the concerns is just the advance notice of your bus isn't going to be here today, leaving some families with very short notice. I'm just wondering, and I understand we're doing everything we can to meet these needs, but is there any way we can shorten, give them as much advance notice as possible, or where is our breakdown in communication? Is it that the bus companies aren't being clear to us about the deficit, or I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Administration.
Director Simpson, President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Five Eric, that's a great comment, great question. Absolutely. So I'm trying to just conceptualize how I'm going to answer this question. So the challenge really is staffing, right? And so what ends up happening is drivers are to report at a specific time. If they're not in at, let's just say, 7 o'clock on the dot, doesn't necessarily mean that they're not coming in. I'm just using that as a random time. So typically what happens is then the office staff starts reaching out to the staff member. Hey, are you coming in? Are you 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late? Before they try to reassign, if they have somebody to reassign. Another factor that comes with that is if that does in fact happen, and this is a very specific challenge this year, is then the office staff will then cover a route. And so then you have less office staff to field the calls and then, of course, to report out. And so it's a domino effect of sorts because they have to prioritize between things like answering the phones and getting one of the office staff out on a vehicle to actually pick kids up. And so we have emergency protocol. We've got lines that, we've talked about in the past here that get through to us so that we can report out to other people. And I'll admit I've been having some of those challenges myself, getting this communication out by 7 to not only to the families, but then to the schools right away so that they can plan because they're getting a lot of these calls. And so we're refining the process. And the goal, obviously, is to make sure that, right now the requirement is that they're supposed to report it by 7 a.m. because the vast majority of our schools start at 8:05. So, and we got 45-minute runs, so that would, in theory, give us 5 to 10 minutes to get that massive communication out so that families know before they get out to the stop. That's going to have to move up, and I kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier today, that we're going to have to get these communications out there, 6 o'clock, if we're going to have these challenges with first-tier schools that are going to start next week. And absolutely, the goal is to get as clear and as efficient of a communication out as we can. and we're, I guess, working out the bugs and trying to just get that information as quickly as possible and make sure that it's as accurate as possible. Because then, the other flip side of this is then we report a bus is not coming, and then the driver pops in and says, "I'm ready to go," and then now we have to undo the message. And so that's, I think, part of the challenge at the bus company level. But we are absolutely going to be doing our very best if we have those issues that persist to get that communication out, hopefully before any family member steps out of their front door.
Dr. Simpson, follow-up?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I guess the other thing that I heard from families is like, how long do we anticipate this shortage to go? Because, the idea was like, do we start creating little carpools, kind of like, they understand the issue, but then they also don't want to be caught. I need to get to work and I don't have transportation. So I know this is probably a very difficult question to answer, but is there sort of like a timeline where you think, I heard a little bit of that, but.
Administration.
Director Simpson, President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Fife Herrick. I would love for that answer to be, we're between now and the end of this week, we're going to resolve all of our issues. That's still the goal. I think a more accurate kind of reflection on where we're at is, the first couple of weeks, we're going to, and it is very difficult, it's speculative, it's hard for me to really estimate, on the first day of this next round of schools, who's going to come back, and then once these things like the unemployment benefits and all that kind of expire, who's going to start walking in the door. But I am absolutely hopeful that, by the third week of the traditional school, that we're like back to what we would anticipate a normal school year. And it's 3 weeks that, in past years, we'd be talking about the first 2 weeks being a challenge in a good year. So, I'm keeping that goal really pretty much the same. And to say that we may experience a little bit more of those issues, but I really do anticipate that by, I guess what I would say third Friday area of the school year, that we've stabilized to the best of our ability, and we're really not seeing large quantities of any issues. The X factor is, what's going to happen with Delta COVID, how many people are going to have to quarantine, including drivers and all these things. And, as long as we can keep a healthy workforce, I do think that the people who have left they've left. Now it's just incrementally increasing the workforce. And that actually bodes well for us, because we really have shaved that fleet down to a very manageable level, if you're going to call 40 buses short manageable, and we're still fixing that between now and, let's just say the end of next week. So I don't know if I was beating around the bush a little bit there. I'm sorry.
No.
But I do think, it looks good relative to kind of like what I would think a lot of the United States is comparatively. So if their bad is here, I really do feel like our bad is down here, and that, I do feel good about that, I guess, a little bit. And I think that we'll get to that place where it'll be not noticeable-ish by third Friday.
Dr.
Great.
Simpson,
No,
any follow-up?
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Director Leonard, then Director Garcia.
I guess, and just more of a suggestion, what I'm getting from parents is they just need a little bit better communication all the way around. So more of like a opportunity for me, if I'm going to talk to my parents when they're calling me, I just need the opportunity to make sure I have accurate information to give to them. I just think that would clear up a lot of the stress levels, so that we can be pretty much up front with them, so they know really what's going on from the start. And I'm very straightforward with my parents. If it's a problem with bus drivers, or it's a problem with, we have 25 bus drivers that are out with COVID, that's what I'm going to tell them. I'm going to say, here's the situation. I think they're more open to respecting us if we're just pretty much upfront and honest about it. Thank you.
Administration.
President Peterson, members of the board, that's one of the things that we totally sincere have, that same belief. We have added additional support to David's office to support him with making sure those phone calls are going out, also making sure that families have access to the stranded bus if we know that a bus is not coming. And also making sure that Carly talked about to the principal as well as to those families, that information out there so we get as much information as we possibly can out front so that they know in a timely fashion. But like you said, the thing that poses the problem for us on the day of, if someone's supposed to be there and they don't show up, we can't really get it out any quicker because we don't know if that person is going to be 10 minutes late for his or her route or going to be 20 minutes or not even a no-show. So that is the piece. But also, even with the route adjustments and changes, to make sure that we are calling to explain exactly what's happening, when a bus will be provided, and all of the steps that we have in place, offering of the county bus pass, seeing if we have small vehicle fleet to be able to meet that need, and just working around to make sure that we are able to meet those needs for families.
Thank you. Director Leonard, then Garcia, then Gokul Gandhi. Okay, Director Garcia.
My question is more around clarification. So I know that you say communication goes out. Can you just, I guess, what does that look like? Like, what platforms are we using? Like, what are the touch points that families are receiving in terms of, a bus is running late or you've been assigned a new bus route? Just, if you can just walk us through that.
Administration.
President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Five Ferrick. Right now, we do mail and electronic. So right now, we have always done what we call the postcard. It's a traditional postcard that comes at the beginning of the year. You put on your fridge or wherever you're going to put it so that it's advertised in your household, and then send revised postcards. We continue to utilize that method. We've integrated School Messenger, so the exact same messaging system that schools use, we use. We take our transportation data, export that out, and have, canned messages, Siri kind of talking to the folks if we're not going to give our own voice, and then we do text and email. So the mail obviously takes a couple days, so we'll typically mail something, and if we know that we need a change, like right now in this environment, we're doing almost exclusively electronic communications because I don't want anybody waiting 4 days for a change, right? In a normal universe, we would say, okay, you're going to get your bus changed on Wednesday and you have your current bus until then. We're doing all school messenger messaging, and I can feel free if anybody's interested, I can give you a snapshot of what that would look like. If you want to see an email, a voicemail, and a text, I can send that to governance as well. That kind of just gives you kind of a visual of what that looks like, and they're both for changes of route as well as delays because of anything. It could be an accident, traffic, things of that nature. But that's the primary means. We do supplement that. We have a supervisor for every region, so we supplement that with a communication directly to the school secretary. So in some schools they have a transportation secretary, and some they just have the secretary, and of course we reach out to them because as much as we want to communicate to families, we got to make sure that the students are in the right bus line at the end of the day, and the teachers have that responsibility to make sure that that's occurring. So we certainly don't want kids to be put in the wrong bus line if we made a change, and so we, on the back end of this process, also communicate with the schools, and that serves another purpose for us. We obviously have a very lean staff at Central Services with all these students riding on buses. We want to utilize those office staff to communicate, and we want families to feel like they can go one-stop shop and talk to their school about whatever issue it is, including busing. So if we're getting that information to the school office, that helps us get the message out to families as well.
Thank you. Follow-up, Director Garcia?
No, but just memories of when I used to get my little card in the mail. So I lived in the south side and would get bused to the northwest side of the city, and I just remember the excitement and fear of getting my bus route assigned, and just mirroring the hear my colleagues in terms of just thank you for the work. I know it's very hard, and a lot of elements are out of your control in your office and your team. But like a lot of my peers have also said, we as long as we're getting that information out in a timely manner, I think we should be able to, work in union with our families. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi.
I think it would be helpful when, we have our traditional start schools, just to get an email with, like, what are the statistics, right? Like, how many buses went out? How many drivers were you short? Just so that when we're talking about information, it would be nice to, if a parent calls or asks, what's going on, I can say, here's what I know, real-time information, what's happening this week. So I think if you could send just a memo to board governance when traditional schools start, that just has some of those quick facts that we can then relay to our parents, that would be helpful. So that's one thing. And then I just have one more thing.
Okay, administration.
Director Gokul Gandhi, President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Fiferic, of course, I'd be glad to do that.
Thanks. And then the second thing, obviously not now because you're really busy, but it would be great to see a feasibility study on what it looks like to employ some of our parents, maybe to fill some of the gaps, right? Our parents know children in the neighborhood who might attend schools together. So how can we leverage, who we already have and the relationships that we already have to fill maybe some of the needs, right, on the far north side of the city to get to Riverside High School or to get to Golda Meir, whatever these specialty programs might be. So would it be possible for you to do maybe an analysis of, are there parents who are interested in maybe doing some of these contracted services with us to drive children to school and fill some of the gaps maybe in the middle of the year, just so that we can, because I don't think that the shortage of this is going to improve. I think this is going to be a continual problem. And so how can we be proactive in finding solutions that are right in our backyard?
Administration.
Director Gokul Gandhi, President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Fiferic. I'd be glad to kind of put something together. A lot of the challenges have to do with insurance and risk management, and you got to obviously be careful when you are facilitating those types of arrangements where a parent is transporting more than their own children. So that becomes, I think, a little bit of a challenge. A lot of our drivers obviously have students in the district, so a more tangible relationship would be to try to say, hey, are you interested in being a driver, and how can we help you be work for a contractor? Typically, we obviously don't get in the business of how companies decide to market and employ. That's their job. That's what we contract them out to do. They're supposed to do a good job with that. Obviously, we're in unique times, so it does require unique strategies, and that's part of the reason why we were kind of partnering, I guess, in the last couple weeks to get the message out with contractors and make sure that we collaborate and try to be team players in solving the problem.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Just one. Yes, I think you're right that unique, times require unique solutions. And so I think if we could have another report maybe on that in a couple months, just a SWOT analysis, right? If it's not feasible, it's not feasible. But I think at least trying to explore other options that are going to supplement this and help alleviate some of the issues we're having, it would be helpful. Just to even know if it's possible.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Board Governance? Oh, wait, Dr.
Information
Posley.
from his monthly report.
My mistake.
Oh, no problem.
Dr. Posley.
Thank you, David. And to conclude my report, I would just like to first recognize and congratulate all of those students who graduated from Milwaukee Public Schools as a member of the class of 2021. As a result of completing credits necessary to graduate over the summer, we had over 100 students to do just that, and so congratulations to those students. And secondly, we are celebrating the 2021-22 school year in many ways, including the 14th annual Run Back to School, which takes place on Saturday, August the 28th. And we are going to be collaborating with the Milwaukee Health Department and the administrators there to administer vaccines at the Run Back to School. So we encourage everyone, it's time to sign up, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you on Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I do have a question about the Family Guide and just wanted to put in a plug that it's my understanding that there's now an incentive program at the state level that those who get vaccinated are eligible for a $100 gift card. So it is my understanding that if somebody avails themselves of this service on Saturday at the Run Back to School, then they may be eligible for some funds. So I would definitely encourage those who haven't already been vaccinated to take us up on this opportunity. That's just a statement, not a question. I did have a question, though, related to the Family Guide. Somebody had reached out to me about, and I'm not asking for a specific response to this individual's situation, but their child was referred for quarantine, and she said that we should be following we say we're following CDC guidelines. She said that the guidelines had been updated on August 4th, I believe, and so I just wanted to make sure, not that I need a response right now, but have we taken a look at the most current guidelines and how are we incorporating that for the quarantine needs? So if we don't have that response now, is that something that we can look at and get a response in the near future?
President Peterson and members of the board, when we drafted the Family Guide, we took in consideration all changes to the CDC guidelines as well as the Milwaukee Health Department guidelines, and you will see in there that it ranges from 10 to 14 days. And so that is there, and it's also a fluid process. So when those changes are up, when there's upgraded data from the CDC or the Milwaukee Health Department, we will be adding that new data as it changes. And also when it comes to quarantining for students, we have a situation, we have it set so that we will be providing our students a packet that they will take home with them. We also have teachers that are going to be working after hours to meet with those students, online to give them virtual instruction. And we have worked with the Department of Public Instruction that these students will be receiving credit excuse absence for that particular time.
Thank you. Follow up here?
Yeah, so that's 10 to 14 days. I think the CDC, they have options to reduce quarantine for contacts of person, like they have a whole thing. I just want to make sure that, especially given that the expectation is that we're handing kids a packet of information, that we are not quarantining more than necessary if there's any way that we can reduce that, or if with ESSER funds, if we are able to hire LTEs just to be, I understand we'll have people working after hours, but if there's any way we can provide support during the day so they're getting more instructional support, that would be good. Because I anticipate that just looking at the way that things are going, that we're going to have a lot of kids quarantining, too many kids. And so I know parents are eager to have their kids in school. I'm eager to have my child in school when they start. So anything that we can do to support these students through quarantine, I would sincerely appreciate that. Thanks.
Administration, do you wish to comment?
President Peterson and members of the board, I 110% agree with that, and we're looking at that. And this whole thing with contact tracing, one of the things that we have deployed is to make sure that our students are sitting in assigned seats. So we know exactly where a child may be sitting each day that they come in so that we can have control around contact tracing. So we know who was around and working through that. But, we are, working and having those collaborations with the health department and the school nurses, nurses supervisors, kind of talking about what that looked like and trying to mitigate to make sure that we are not, we're not sending students out that should not be out. So we're just trying to make sure that we are sending out the child that and that needs to be quarantined and working through that. And also there are some other guidelines exist when it's a person that is fully vaccinated. so that, we have children that are fully vaccinated as well. So there's a lot goes into the contact tracing piece. Along with that, to make sure that we're doing a robust job around that, we have individuals that are contact tracing after school hours and weekends now. So around the clock, because we're doing contact tracing for the adults in the organization as well as all of the students in the organization.
Okay, thank you. Madam Secretary, I believe we're now ready for reports or communications from the Office of Board Governance.
Yes, Mr. President, we do have two communications from the Office of Board Governance. The first communication is action on approval of a technical amendment to correct contract items previously submitted and approved by the board. The recommendation is for approval of the technical amendments to the documents attached to this communication.
Would the board clerk please present the item?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, as a part of the contract execution process, the Office of Board Governance actually conducts a review of all contracts submitted to the office for the board president's signature. During that review process, it was discovered that the contract submitted on July 29th relative to the award of professional services contracts for the Arts and Humanities project, which were 50 individual contracts, were submitted with a start date of September 1st, 2020. That has since been corrected to reflect the 2021 start date, and we are just bringing that forward so that the board's action is reflected in the official minutes and in collaboration with the intent of the contract that was submitted. The template has been updated, and the awardees will still be able to get their contracts, and the schools will still be able to get their services beginning with that September 1st date, as well as another small amendment relative to correcting a vendor's name, relative to an apostrophe and where it goes in the name. So we're bringing both of those to you so that your minutes accurately reflect the intent of the contract and the board's actions.
Does the board wish to make any comments? What is the pleasure of the board with respect to this item? Director O'Halloran.
I move that we approve the technical amendments to the attached documents.
I see a second from Director Gokul-Gandhi. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the technical amendment of the contracts previously submitted to the board relative to the professional services contracts, seconded by Director Gokul-Gandhi. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul-Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
And Chair Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Very good. Madam Secretary, what is the next communication?
The next communication from the Office of Board Governance is the monthly report with possible action relative to the legislative affairs affecting Milwaukee Public Schools. That report is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the board clerk please present the report?
Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Chris Steele is at the podium ready to provide the report.
Go for it, Chris.
President Peterson, members of the board, thank you. Chris Steele, Legislative Policy Manager for the Office of Board Governance in Milwaukee Public Schools. Focusing on two areas specifically this month, one at the state level and then the action taking place at the federal level. At the state level, we had a committee hearing on Senate Bill 411, Assembly Bill 411, related to anti-racism, anti-sexism instruction. This is a bill that has frankly just been wrapped up into the critical race theory fervor that we've been seeing across the country. And this is the Wisconsin version of that, what the Wisconsin Association of School Boards has termed, frankly, a culture war bill. The concerns are many. Alan Borsick, columnist for the Journal Sentinel, had an article where he pointed out that it was not clear to him, frankly, it's not clear to anybody, whether you could even speak about the bill when teaching a current events class or a social studies class in a classroom in the state of Wisconsin, because you could run afoul of the law if you were a teacher trying to describe what this bill was about. And frankly, The discussion took 7 hours at this committee hearing. We were registered and are positioned against the bill for any number of reasons, including the fact that we, the board and the district, support teaching of American history and any number of social justice issues related to that. I thought there was a telling exchange between one of the authors of the bill and Dr. Ruben Anthony, president of the Urban League in Madison, where the author of the bill declared that perhaps we were over-teaching some subjects. And Dr. Anthony pointed out, I think correctly, that historically we have under-taught the subjects that were being discussed here. It's one of these situations where, we talk about a slippery slope. I think we're on that slope. I think we saw evidence in that room that some things that we might want to dismiss as though they would never happen. We're in an environment where we have to be diligent. I know the board has certainly been diligent, where we had suggestions of teachers wearing body cameras so that instruction could be recorded and viewed. And this we had former Sheriff David Clark in the room. We had other testimony kind of going down that line. And other places we've seen some of those suggestions. There's been a situation in Nevada where this has even been voiced. It's not clear where this bill is going to go. It was a joint hearing on both the Senate and the Assembly, of the Senate and Assembly committees. Next move would be to move it to either the floor of the Senate or Assembly. That has not taken place yet. And to be very clear, along with just the issues of concern that have been discussed here and that MPS has addressed in the past, if we ran afoul of this law, which no one can really define what it is, the penalty to the Milwaukee Public School System would be the withholding of $61 million from the district. So here you have a piece of legislation that is about this critical race theory topic. Critical race theory is not actually mentioned in the bill, as was discussed. No one could agree during the committee meeting what critical race theory was. It ultimately was termed about anti-racism, anti-sexism instruction, which are things that we address and should be addressed, and the penalty is $61 million. So obviously we are in opposition to that and are working with our partners to make sure that we have a reasonable conclusion if this in fact moves forward. The other area that to draw your attention to is what's going on at the federal level. I'm sure the board has been following the discussions about the federal infrastructure bill, and now as of this week, the House has cleared procedural hurdle where they are in the upcoming weeks here going to be discussing the detail of what will be in the federal budget. September 9th, I think, so far it's preliminary, but is going to be an important date and truly significant in the history of education in the United States of America. That's when the Education and Labor Committee will be meeting, 11 a.m., to discuss the detail of what will be included in the education provisions at the federal level. What's interesting, the top line conversation, as I'm sure people have seen, we hear a $3.5 trillion number. Some of the discussion and positioning, frankly, I think some folks hide behind that number, but the needs are real. The needs are evident, and President Biden proposed a $100 billion school infrastructure plan that was taken out of the infrastructure bill, and Senator Bobby Scott and colleagues have proposed a $130 billion plan related to infrastructure that we are pushing with our partners, Council of Great City Schools, primary among them, to see included in the federal budget package, which would obviously have a direct and important impact on school districts across the country, on MPS in particular. And just a reminder that when we did go through the referendum process and we were asked to be clear about the needs of the district, we pointed out at that time that I think we had about 1.4 billion of infrastructure need. It kind of took people's breath away. We saw the reaction in the media that that's too big, that's too much. But those dollar figures mean real things in our school buildings, obviously. So the needs are real. We stand behind the needs of our students in our school district and are hopeful in the weeks ahead here that we will see passage of some of these policies, which will make a huge difference, not only on the infrastructure side, early childhood, provisions for helping to attract and retain, recruit teachers, what have you, any number of very important policies. I would ask, and there's actually a piece circulating now. Obviously, Congresswoman Gwen Moore has been a champion of MPS and has fought for this district. And anytime you can put a thank you call into your senator or your congressperson, I think that's a great thing to do and a helpful thing to do. And to not only thank our representatives at the federal level, but ask them to support the needs of our school district. Now is the time to do that. And I think those calls would be welcome. So happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Does the board wish to make any comments? Dr. Leonard.
First of all, I don't envy your job. My blood pressure goes up every time you come up here. I just find it, I don't know, insane. So I've had some parents, a group of parents, confront me probably, a couple months ago about CRT, and I went out of my way to, when I visited my schools, to go and talk to teachers at each building. I find there's a lot of irony in all of this, since only 2 teachers out of the 17 buildings that I went to even knew what the acronym CRT is. But I'm just just want to thank you for the work you do. Obviously, we need infrastructure badly. Almost every administrator that I've talked to has said, if you could give me a new building, I would change enrollment overnight. And I do believe that we've seen that in other districts where they've gotten the referendum, they've built new buildings, and even though taxpayers were very upset about the amount of money, they loved the new building, and that's where they're sending their children. So that would be a big boon for MPS without question. Thank you.
Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the committee hearing, the joint committee hearing, because I was there for part of the day. I was not able to stay the whole day. I had to get back to a meeting, but I think Senator Larson's description of it as a circus was correct. It was, I found the author of the bill unable to describe the enforcement mechanisms, what it actually covered. The idea came across that members, they couldn't define critical race theory, but they knew it when they saw it. So it was just such a show, and it seemed like such theater, because ultimately, I don't think if it does pass out of the legislature, I'm not sure that Governor Evers would sign such a bill, and perhaps you could comment on that. But it was really disappointing, and just down to, like, we talked about this, I think, last year when President Miller was still here. Like, when we talk about teaching accurate history, when The Watchmen aired on HBO, millions of Americans went to Google the Tulsa massacre because they didn't even know that it happened. So, like, just to echo the comments that we're not even doing a good enough job of teaching the truth now. So to try to take steps back from that, to dial back that conversation, would be a real disservice to our students and staff. And then holding over our heads, losing 10% of our funding when they didn't even give us an increase of per pupil funding this year. It's just, it was such a show. And it was very unfortunate that people came to testify not wearing masks, and then we found out afterwards that there were people in the building who tested positive for COVID. So it was just top to bottom a very, I don't know. I don't know how I would describe it. A circus, perhaps. And then just to pivot, the one other about our needs and the fact that the state, once again, is sitting on $1 billion that they did not use for this biennium. We have seen this week having to close school early because of the heat index. And we need to close early because we don't have enough air conditioning in enough of our buildings. And I want to connect this to the chronic underfunding of our schools. I don't think that we make this decision to not install $2 million worth of air conditioning, because it's my understanding that that's what it costs to put a chiller on a building. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we have stagnant funding and the state decides not to give us an increase in per pupil funding or increase the special education reimbursement rate despite sitting on $1 billion, we need to make really tough decisions about how to best position this, this situation for our children so we're not cutting other services. But I just want to, once again, implore our representatives in Madison to help us help our students. This isn't a question of comfort. There's actual studies that show after 80 degrees that there is learning loss associated with that. And it's most acutely felt by students who are Black and brown, and that is predominantly our district. And so this isn't just a question of give them an extra, stick of deodorant and antiperspirant and deal with it. It is not just because it's uncomfortable, it's because we're actually putting our students at physical risk and at risk of learning loss. And so I guess if anybody happens to be listening, I would once again just ask our state legislators and to help us help our students succeed. So I'm sorry for my little soapbox.
Thank you. What about the governor? Any thoughts on his attitude towards 411?
Director Peterson, members of the board, to my recollection at this point, I don't know that we've heard a direct comment on that. Usually the bill would proceed to the floor and that question would be asked of the governor. Given how the legislation is constructed and given the fact that we have this 10% arbitrary penalty, just from experience, I would say I can't imagine a governor signing this into law, given how just given everything involved and how poorly crafted the legislation is. I think, Director Halloran, to your point about at the state budget level, there is over $1 billion of unallocated funds available. And districts are going through the reality that we just discussed here, that if you don't have an inflationary increase and costs of everything, not only related to COVID, but everything in terms of inflation are going up, and other school districts are seeing the same transportation issues and other things, costs aren't going down, costs go up. We know that. And under Tommy Thompson, when he invented the revenue limit as part of his administration, there was a promised inflationary increase. That was not provided. So even that bare minimum wasn't provided, and the funds are there to absolutely at least do that. So that issue will not go away. And then if I could comment on frankly, the leadership of the administration, leadership of the board, on some of these social justice issues and this critical race phenomenon in particular. I was in a meeting earlier today with the Bridges Collaborative. The board has authorized some work with that organization nationally. And every district on that call was being put into a situation where, in essence, they're being threatened at board meetings, that there is this anger, that there is this attack on even mentioning the fact that social justice issues need to be addressed. So I would say from that, the fact that we have districts that are in a position to lead and speak out is meaningful, not only for districts in the state of Wisconsin, but for districts across the country who may not be in a similar position. They took strength from the fact that other districts were able to be on the front foot in standing up for students. So just wanted to leave that note.
Thank you. Any other comments by the board? Okay, Madam Secretary, thank you, Mr. Thiel, for all your hard work. Madam Secretary, what is the next communication?
The next communication is from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency, and that is the monthly report. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the Office of Accountability and Efficiency please present the report?
Thank you, Chair Peterson. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. That report is attached. Additionally, our report out on our FY21 work plan is also attached. This includes our actual activities, outputs, and outcomes as they relate and compare to the targets that we set in the plan for the previous year. I'd like to just briefly highlight the year-over-year increase in the total number of projects that we had completed in the accountability and efficiency service area, and then also the year-over-year increase in the historically underutilized business participation, the communities in need labor participation, and also the student engagement participation, all occurring within our contract compliance service area. The fact that all of these actually took place in a mostly remote work model as a data point I don't think we want to casually overlook. And then lastly, we're currently analyzing the capacity in our contract compliance service area to handle what we expect to be an uptick in contracting under our ESSER funding. If we anticipate that need exceeding capacity, we'll come back with a request to increase that capacity in the budget adjustment cycle in October. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, Board, do you have any questions? Well, thank you very much. We'll, if I believe I'm right, we'll now have the reports of the standing committees. Since public hearing was given at the committee meetings, the Board, as is customary, will not be giving public hearing on these reports this evening. Madam Secretary, what is the first report?
The first report is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item 2, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days has been set aside at the request of the administration. Item number 4, action on Resolution 2122R-9 by Director Peterson regarding COVID-19 vaccinations has been set aside at the request of President Peterson. And item number 7, action on the award of the exception to bid contracts has been set aside at the request of President Peterson. Item number 9, action on a request to approve the lease agreement with the Milwaukee Excellence Charter School for the Douglas School location at 3620 North 18th Street has been set aside at the request of Director Herndon.
Thank you. Do any board members wish any other items from this report to be set aside? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Members of the board, anyone wish to set any items from this committee aside? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, what is the next item?
The next item is the report of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. Item number 2, action on Resolution 2122R-001 by Director O'Halloran on the Charter School Program and Process has been set aside as it was sent to the board without recommendation.
Do any board members wish any other items to be set aside? Okay, in that case, I'd ask for a motion, an action on a motion for the balance of the reports of the standing committees. Do I have a motion? Vice President Taylor.
I'll move the balance of the items.
Okay, and I see Director O'Halloran seconds it. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
On Vice President Taylor's motion to approve the balance of the reports of the standing committees, seconded by Director O'Halloran. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what is the next item?
The next item on the agenda are the items that were set aside. And the first item that was set aside was from the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, item number 2, Action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days, and that has been set aside at the request of the administration. The committee recommendation was to, one, authorize the promotions, reassignment, decreases, and increases in salary and the appointments to the classifications indicated in the item. And two, approve the limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days pursuant to Administrative Policy 6.23, Parent 4, Parent B, to be effective as indicated in the attachment. This item was set aside at the request of the administration.
Dr. Posley, would you please give us your comments?
Yes, President Peterson and members of the board, we are asking for your approval of this item as amended in the item. Thank you.
Does the board wish to make any comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
members of the board, if we could indicate what the change is.
Administration?
President Peterson, members of the board, Adrian Maddaleni, Chief of Human Resources, there is a correction on a pay grade that was listed on one of the appointments. And that's the purpose for the updated appointment list.
So noted.
Does the board wish to make any comments? Vice President Taylor?
Thank you. Was the amendment included in here? I guess I'm just trying to figure out. I know they said it was a pay grade. Was it incorrect and we're correcting it? I just don't see it, so it may just be me.
Administration?
President Peterson, Vice President Taylor, members of the board, Adrian Maddaleni, Chief of Human Resources. If you look at the last appointment for the Planning Assistant 3, there's a corrected pay grade of a 2A versus a 3A.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other comments by the board? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of the board with respect to this item? Somebody wants to make a motion?
To approve.
Director Garcia makes the motion, and seconded by Gokul Gandhi, Director Gokul Gandhi, excuse me. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Chair, just so for the listening audience, is the motion to approve the administration's recommendation for the item with the amendment as attached?
Yes.
And that was seconded by Director Gokul Gandhi?
Yes.
Thank you.
Please, could you take the roll?
On Director Garcia's motion to approve the administration's recommendation with the amendment as illustrated in the attachment to this item, seconded by Director Gokul Gandhi. Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director Leonard?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Vice President Taylor?
Aye.
And President Peterson?
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what's the next item set aside?
The next item set aside is item number 4, action on Resolution 2122R-9 by Director Peterson regarding COVID-19 vaccinations, and this has been set aside at the request of President Peterson. The committee's recommendation was to adopt the resolution with a report due back to the board in October of 2021.
Okay, I'd like to pass the gavel to the Vice
So
President.
noted.
Passed it. Director Peterson?
Thank you very much. I just want to remind people in the listening audience that this resolution was about the notion of requiring vaccines by all staff members, and it had a series of whereases, which I will not read. But I would like to move the adoption of the resolution with the following changes, which have to do with the resolve, like with what we expect to happen. So I move to adopt the resolution with the following changes. Resolved that the board hereby directs the administration to explore the feasibility of implementing mandatory COVID vaccinations for all employees. That was what it was, and there was no changes from that. Further resolved that the exploration include information on the legality and enforceability of such a mandate, the means by which the employees may request an accommodation or waiver pursuant to the requirements of the ADA, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, and other federal, state, and state laws that may require a waiver option, and also that the means by which employees who are not vaccinated will be required to be tested weekly for COVID in a manner that protects their privacy rights under the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. And be it, and this is the next two resolves are addition, and be it further resolved that the plan, and the plan include, that's the plan coming back from the administration, a component to offer an incentive to eligible students and staff who have been or will be vaccinated, and be it further resolved that based on the investigation of these matters, the administration include any recommendations and any adjustments to protocols that may be necessary to lessen the likelihood of staff and students contracting COVID-19, and be it, and this resolve has been changed, you'll note, further resolved that the administration report its findings and recommendations at a special meeting of the board to be called by the board president the week of September 6, 2021. Given this, and I'll just comment, Chair Taylor, that given the urgency of our situation that we face with the Delta variant, I felt that waiting to the end of September was not adequate. And we wanted to take action before then. And so this provides, doesn't say we're going to take action, but it provides us the opportunity to take action in the second week of September on three key elements: the vaccination requirement, any possible incentive, and any changes in protocol. I think. So I move that.
Do we need a second? Thank you. Because he's moving it at the full meeting, do we need a second? Okay, can we have a second? Director Simpson, second it. Thank you. Yeah. Director Simpson was just seconding the motion that was put forward by President Peterson. Okay, so Director Gogagandi is the first one in the queue, and then I'll hear those other names. Director Gogagandi, you have the floor.
So I move that we adopt.
No, it's already been moved by President
kidding.
Peterson and
Okay.
second by Director Simpson.
I have no comments.
No question or comments. Who was the next person in the queue, Madam Secretary? Thank you, Director Garcia and O'Halloran, in that order, please. Director Garcia, you have the floor.
My question was only in regards to the clarification on who would be incentivized for vaccination of students and staff who have been or will be vaccinated. But now that we have a paper copy in front of me, I'm very clear on what it was saying.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you, Director Garcia.
Yep.
Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a statement that between the time that we had this meeting and then the previous meeting where we considered this, and then tonight, the Pfizer has been granted full approval by the FDA. So I know that was one concern that some people may have had, but it is not emergency use authorization at this point. It has been granted the full approval by the FDA. So I think that's an important note. I would also, so I do agree and I fully support this. I was wondering if we could also consider any other, I don't want to grow the scope too much, but given that we tonight heard that we are potentially looking at 50 bus drivers, I don't know if any plan that we consider, if we may need to consider any additional staff. So beyond our, I don't know the mechanism that, but I would just encourage us to think about all of the many adults who interact with our students and, you know, if there are any that would critically like interrupt our school services if we were missing those people. So I don't know if that's possible to be added. I'm not trying to really add the verbiage, but just if we can add that as, explore it as part of the plan.
I'll go back to the originator of the amendment.
I'm a little unclear what you want to add. We have, just to repeat for the listening audience, the question of requiring vaccinations, the question for both staff and student of possible incentives, and then a broader category of any adjustments to protocols having to do with COVID-19. So that's a pretty wide mark that the administration will be able to bring back anything they feel. But what
Okay, back to Director O'Halloran, just for clarification, and I remember you used the example of the bus drivers, but they are not MPS employees, so I guess we're trying to, for the originator of motion, he's trying to understand exactly who are you trying to include.
And that was my point, is that if we have any staff who are not MPS staff, they're not employed by MPS, I don't know if we're able to, obviously we can't force them, but if we could incentivize perhaps, if we're already down 50 drivers, I don't know, and I don't want to grow the scope too much, so I'm trying to be mindful. So just if we can consider that as part of this, I see administration's head seems to understand, but I don't.
You're done?
Yeah.
So administration, if you're understanding, can you give us any feedback? And that may be something for the city attorney, but I don't know if we can possibly do it if they are not staff of MPS, but administration, the floor is yours.
Okay, President Peterson, Director O'Halloran, Adrian Maddaleni, Chief of Human Resources. My understanding is you're looking at the feasibility of us incorporating contractors in this process, and can we legally require them or encourage them to follow a vaccine mandate?
Yes. Director O'Halloran is saying yes, that is her question.
Yes, that's something we can explore and look into and give some feedback or recommendation.
Okay, now I would like to just go back to the originator of the motion because this is his amendment. So are you understanding it now? Do you consider it friendly?
Yeah, I understand that. It seems, I don't think we have to have any language changes in it, but the administration has pledged to come back and give us some information, legal and what like.
All right, thank you. I think we have that clear. Any other follow-up, Director O'Halloran?
Nope.
No. I see Director Carr hands up. Director Carr, you have the floor.
Quick question. Would it be meaningful or I guess make any sense to define what the incentives will be in here? Can we add that in?
Director Peterson.
My thinking is that the administration will come back with some recommendations and options, and at that time it would be most useful, because I think we could have a really long conversation tonight, but lack some information. It'd be good to see what other districts have done on both levels, and so I definitely, and we'll, just for the record, that that special meeting will be a meeting that will have a public hearing, so community people can speak out on any of those issues, those three main issues.
Thank you.
Director Gogolchandi.
Vice President Taylor, I move to call the question.
Any objection to? The question has been called. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on the question, please.
On Director Peterson's motion, seconded by Director Simpson, relative to Resolution 2122R-009 regarding COVID-19 vaccinations. And I just want to be clear for our listening audience. The motion is to move approval of the resolution as amended and submitted in writing by President Peterson tonight. Madam Chair, members of the committee, this document will be posted for the public so that everyone is aware of what the specificity is relative to the resolved portions of the resolution.
I was about to say that. Thank you for that, so they can understand and see the wording and we're not getting questions. Okay. Call the roll, Madam Secretary.
On the motion to approve Resolution 2122R-009 as amended by President Peterson on the board floor. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Peterson.
Aye.
And Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. The gavel is being handed back, Madam Clerk.
So noted.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 7, action on the award of exception to bid contracts. The recommendation is that the board authorize the exception to bid contracts as set forth in the attachments to this item.
And I believe that this item has been set aside at the request of me, right? And so I'm going to pass the gavel back to the Vice
So noted.
President.
Director Peterson, you have the floor.
Okay, so I asked for this report on the Committee of Accountability and Finance Personnel to be looked at again on item 7, which is a contract number 4, which is part of the action on awards of exception to bid contracts, and that's for the Nature's Classroom Institute of Wisconsin. And the original contract was quite detailed, and it was $300,000 for students in the Montessori schools to attend this Nature Classroom Institute, which is an overnight activity. And I just want to say from the outset, I absolutely support the work of the Montessori schools. I'm very proud to promote them. I'm also a strong advocate of environmental education. And however, I think I'm going to move the following, and you'll see why when I say it. I move approval of this contract and direct the administration to identify an additional $300,000, possibly from vacancy pay, to be used to fund nature-related field trips, with priority going to overnight camping field trips for non-Montessori schools, to increase equity in our support for outdoor educational programming for all students.
Madam Mayor, do we have a second?
Madam Chair, members of the board, I believe, and just for clarity, Director Peterson, is it your intent to move the administration's recommendation?
Yeah, I said I move approval of the contract and direct, I meant the administration's recommendation for the original contract to support the Montessori schools, yes.
So with the item inclusive of all of the contracts for the exception to bid?
Oh, yes, I don't want to go through them all.
So
So
noted.
would that be the correct way, Madam Secretary, just to ensure that we are all aligning and have it verbatim by word and correctly?
Madam Chair, members of the board, the wording would be that the board president moves approval of the administration's recommendation with the added language of adding $300,000 for field trips for traditional MPS schools.
Okay, just for my clarity, so that I'm understanding and probably the listening audience, when we say we've moved in the administration's recommendation, but it's also with the amendment of the extra 300,000, or just the language of the 300,000, just so we're clear.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I believe, and please correct me, President Peterson, I believe the motion is to move approval of all of the exception to bid contracts, including the one for the Nature Center. And number 2, to add an additional $300,000 to be identified for nature field trips.
Thank you. And Director Peterson, is that correct on your?
Right, to be used to fund nature-related field trips with priorities going to overnight camping trips for non-Montessori schools.
Thank you. And the second for that motion was Director Carr. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
And Director Carr was the second for that motion.
So noted.
Thank you. Any other board members have any questions or comments on this item? Director Gokul Gandhi.
I guess I would want to know what the feasibility is of finding another $300,000 for non-Montessori students, because that would impact the way that I would think about this contract.
I'll go back to Director Peterson and then probably to administration to see if they.
I had suggested possibly, in my motion, possibly from vacancy pay, but I'm open to any way to fund it.
Administration, do you have any comments on where possibly the extra $300,000 could come? Is it feasible from the vacancy pay?
Vice President Taylor, members of the board, we will be able to make it happen. We will use vacancy pay, and we will use other sources if we are, in order to make it happen.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi, any follow-up?
No, I just wanted to be certain that there was, in fact, an extra $300,000, certainly for non-Montessori students. I just wanted confirmation of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board members, any questions or comments on this item? Director Garcia.
My question is more for clarification. Out of the schools that we have, how many are Montessori? Just want to get an idea of the ratio of the $300,000 for each Montessori and non-Montessori.
Administration.
Director Peterson, President Peterson, Director Garcia, Abigail Rausch, Montessori Coordinator. We have 7 public Montessori schools in the district and 1 public charter school. We service approximately 5,000 students within our Montessori schools.
Right, Director Garcia, any follow-up?
No, thank you. I just wanted clarification on that.
Seeing no other questions or comments. Director Simpson.
Thank you, Director Taylor. I just want to thank Director Peterson for bringing this forward and, being insightful enough and forward-thinking enough to make sure that we are looking at how to grow this program beyond the Montessori group. I know that Montessori education, that's a big component, but I also know it's very valuable for our students to get those outdoor experiences and be in nature. Those of us who have worked with kids, and I know there are many on this stage, know what a powerful experience that can be for them. So I think that investment in our students is will mean a lot to our children and really have a strong impact on them. 1 or 2 nights away can make a world of difference in how a student feels about nature and open their eyes to new experiences. So just wanted to thank him.
Thank you, Director Simpson. Any other committee members? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, can you call the roll on this item, please?
On President Peterson's motion, seconded by Director Carr, which moves approval of the administration's recommendation on the award of exception to bid contracts and directs the administration to identify an additional $300,000, possibly from vacancy pay, to be used to fund nature-related field trips for non-Montessori schools.
Yes, call the roll, Madam Secretary.
On the motion as read into the record, Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
President Peterson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, we were just asking, someone came up to the mic. I don't know if it was something with administration or no. Are we good? I just wanted to make sure. I didn't want anybody to feel like I looked over them. That's why I'm asking.
Vice President Taylor and members of the board, yes, Abigail Rausch, she spoke. She was there to answer a question.
All right, thank you. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you, administration. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
So noted.
Do you have any more? The gavel is passed.
Madam Secretary, what's the next item, please?
The next item is item number 9, action on a request to approve the lease agreement with Milwaukee Excellence Charter School for the Douglas School location located at 3620 North 18th Street, and that has been set aside by Director Herndon. The committee's recommendation was that the board approve the lease agreement with Milwaukee Excellence Charter School for the Douglas location. This item was set aside by Director Herndon.
Dr. Herndon, do you have, make a comment? Tell us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I set aside this item and will be making a motion as well on it because this item cost this board and our administration an awful lot of last-minute work and upsettedness. And so my motion is in hopes of avoiding all of that. I'd like to say a couple of things in support of that is both schools with co-locations are locked into limited growth. And with the investments that this district has placed in that building in particular, which is a middle school building, and the 53206 initiative as well, and the investment from the GE Foundation for the innovation labs. I mean, this is just tremendous, but we would be limiting our own growth in that building. The other thing is Milwaukee Excellence is a high school. And what I have found for many parents, especially signing up for school this fall, is they're actually seeking traditional middle schools, grades 6 through 8, and are not too excited about having their middle schoolers in a building with high school students. The other thing is that the district does have buildings available for sale. The city of Milwaukee has list of MPS buildings. The district has buildings that are available for lease. Let me correct that. And the city has buildings available for sale. That's what I meant to say. So another thing is that the city has 3 charter school authorizers, and the other 2 being UWM Milwaukee and the city of Milwaukee never, ever mention providing buildings for the schools that they authorize. I just wanted to put that out there. So do we really want to make locations a part of our strategic plans going forward? I think that's the more important thing that we should think about, because there could be a lot of other schools that would window shop through the district and select buildings and start pressuring us to allow them to co-locate. So that being the case, the motion that I'm making, I move that we approve the administration's recommendation on this 1-year lease and direct administration provide the board with an update on the progress of long-term facility planning for Milwaukee Excellence that excludes co-location by February 2022 board cycle.
A motion has been made. Is there a second for that? Director Carr seconds the motion. Discussion. Do you want to add anything more, Director Herndon?
No, that's it. Just that administration would bring a report back approving this and having a report brought to us in February of the 2022 board cycle, so that there is not a repeat of this last minute mess that we had to deal with at the end of July. That is the purpose of it.
Can I ask the administration if you have a comment?
President Peterson, members of the board, we will be more than happy to bring that information back to the board in February of this school year. Thank you.
Are there any other comments by this board? Yes, Director Garcia.
Within that report, I think it would be important to also include all of the, I guess, explorative items that have been done, just to kind of provide a historical context, because I think that there's a misconception that there have been no options explored. So, bringing that to the front, that there have been options explored, and just kind of I mean, I do agree that we want to avoid these last-minute situations that put everyone in really bad situations. But, you know, I just wanted to move you all to think about including that item as well.
Thank you. Any other comments by the board? Director Carr.
I think included in that too should be a study or data around co-locating in the past and how it has worked and how it hasn't. I think that's going to be very important too as we continue to engage in this discussion, because I think that's one of the bigger issues is the co-locating.
Okay, any other comment? Seeing no further comments, Madam Secretary, could you take the roll?
Seconded by Director Carr, which is to move approval of the administration's recommendation relative to the lease agreement with Milwaukee Excellence Charter School for the Douglas School located at 3620 North 18th Street. And 2, direct the administration to provide the board with an update on the progress of long-term facilities planning for Milwaukee Excellence that excludes co-location by the February 2022 board cycle. On the motion as read into the record, Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is from the report on student achievement and school innovation. Item number 2, action on Resolution 2122R-1 by Director O'Halloran on the charter school program and process. Your committee has forwarded this item to the board without recommendation.
Does the board wish to make any comments? I'll start with Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. So my intent with writing this resolution, having listened to comments and questions from previous board members, current board members, people who testify, national conversations, et cetera, was to synthesize in one resolution some ways that I think we can move forward, because I think we have a lot of these conversations continuously. So I'm hoping to create an annual process where we just review data, discuss things, put to rest certain misconceptions, and possibly, incorporate best practices back in if there are things that we are missing at the board level. The Wisconsin Charter School Law from the DPI website says that it gives charter schools freedom from most state rules and regulations in exchange for greater accountability for results. So really what I'm trying to do is design an annual reporting process. I did add some things in, incorporating, like I said, statements I had heard from previous board members, which I'm happy to set aside. In particular, I know there was concern around the $15 an hour. So I'd be happy to set that aside. But I want to be clear that when I submitted this resolution, I did not have all of these crossed off. That was done by administration. And so it's my understanding that this was because it was considered duplicative. But if it is duplicative of current information, then I would just say, can you bring it forward in an annual process? So I don't know if, Madam Secretary, you might be able to advise if I would be able to, how we can move forward, because I don't want to move approval of this without, in its current state. So I guess I would just have some questions around that.
So I suggest that you make a motion reading the parts that you want and discarding the parts that you don't. Is that okay, Madam Secretary?
Board and Director O'Halloran, is it your intent to move a motion for the resolution that you originally submitted?
Yes, I would prefer to start from that, and then we can perhaps carve out where, like the $15 an hour, if that was something that was, seemed to cause great consternation, I would be happy to remove that and have that as a separate conversation, not just for charter schools, but for all of our contractors to see where we're at. So I would prefer to start from where I had originally written it, and then move from there. I think that would be better.
So noted.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yes, so not the strike-throughs. I guess the only one that I would carve out then would be the $15 an hour. So I would move approval of the resolution as originally stated, carving out the $15 an hour language.
Meaning eliminating that.
Yes.
Okay. So that is in,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
members of the board, just for our listening audience who may be following along, is the motion to approve the originally, the resolution as originally submitted, striking through the sixth whereas first bullet point, which reads that the school agrees to pay its employees a minimum wage of $15 per hour, which may be phased in over several years to ensure proper budget planning.
Could you repeat where that is?
It is under the sixth further resolved first bullet point.
It's on the second page, the first paragraph.
Okay. So you're suggesting your motion includes taking that first bullet point out, eliminating it. Does it include any other changes?
No.
Okay, so the motion's been made. Is there a second to that motion? Director Taylor?
I would like to second it, but I have.
Sure, go ahead.
All right, thank you. I understand we're saying the original for us on the board, just so that we are all on the same page. There are a couple of strikes out, so just to talk to the chair, for Director O'Halloran, just for an example, it said a report of the academic financial. It is crossed out on what we're looking at, crossed out on your original motion. I just think it can be confusing for us board member as well as those that are listening live, because this is what they would see, not just the $15. So would all of the other things be inclusive and including in this resolution, Director O'Halloran? I'm saying.
Yes, Director O'Halloran?
Thank you, Chair Peterson. Yes, so it would include the original resolved where that there, at the time of renewal of a contract, we would consider a report of academic, financial, and operational standing of the school, a description of the student demographics, including the percent of children with special needs, et cetera. So like where those are struck out, that is, I just want to be clear, I did not submit a resolution with a bunch of strikeouts. So that was not originally struck out. I would ask that we have, for instance, a report of performance data of each charter school be brought to the board for consideration annually. Like that is currently struck out.
Let me just say, you don't have to read what's struck out. Just let's be clear. All the items that have lines through them are back in your resolution.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other comment by the board? Yes, Director Herndon.
I just wanted to bring this to the sponsor's attention, was the last one. If you remember, and so much has transpired since we last looked at this, but there was a lot of people that spoke because they didn't understand the objective of that. And they were speaking and asking questions such as, are you talking about the vendors that purchase goods from and all of that kind of thing? So I don't know if you meant to clarify that and perhaps forgot about it, but there was a lot of misunderstanding on that one.
Director Herndon, could you be explicit where it is?
It is the very last,
On the second page or first page?
yeah. I'm not looking at the one with all the strike-throughs, the one that's posted tonight. It is the last further resolved.
Further resolved that all applicable administrative policies and procedures and guidebooks be updated to reflect the
No,
vote.
just above that, that the school, if it is a non-instrumentality charter, agrees to provide an annual report that describes its relationships, financial agreements, and other partnership agreements. And remember, there were a lot of people that misunderstood that to mean, whomever you did business with, whatever vendor that existed. I just was bringing that to your attention again. Thank you.
Yes, Director O'Halloran.
And yes, thank you for bringing that up. It is not my intent to understand every vendor relationship, but I do think it goes to transparency and financial solvency to understand if there are any charter management organizations or any other, something operating in that capacity that may be going by a different name. So I had kind of referred to it in a manner of different ways, but I certainly am not concerned about who removes garbage from the premises. I'm more concerned around if there is a relationship where they are required to report up certain amount of money, because that kind of could impact whether their long-term viability and ability to partner with us.
Could I ask the administration if there's a way to modify that bullet so that it reflects what she's saying and deals with what Director Herndon was concerned with? Administration?
President Peterson, members of the board, Bridget Chalk, Director of Contracted School Services. So are you, the request is for us to change management company to charter management organization? Is that what you're?
That is one possibility. I'll ask the author of the resolution and the motion if that's acceptable.
Yes, that is acceptable to me. And now that I've clarified intent, I hope it's clear to everyone. And I know that many of our non-instrumentality charters don't have this arrangement. So I know it's not a concern, but I think there's a concern in the way that a previous one had closed, that we just want to be an extra set of eyes on some of these situations, if that makes sense.
So is the second motion, the person who seconded the motion, agreeable to changing that to the Charter Management Organization? Director Carr?
Is it possible, because I'm not quite following I understand that we're going back to the original with one strikeout of the $15 an hour. But I'm not, you made a comment earlier, Director O'Halloran, you made a comment earlier about if this doesn't work, we can go back and revisit. You said something along the lines of, if this doesn't work. I'm kind of confused with what's going on here.
Director, Madam Secretary.
Members of the board, it would probably be helpful if we could read through the resolved portions of the resolution so that the board and the public understands what the board is voting on based on the conversation and changes made on the floor tonight.
Okay, and there might be more changes as well, but yes.
So noted.
Okay, do you want to why don't we read through what we have now so everybody's on the same page? Could you do that, please, Madam Secretary? Thank you.
The resolved portions of the resolution reads as follows. Resolved that when a recommendation to renew a contract with a charter school is brought to the board, that the recommendation include a report of the academic, financial, and operational standing of the school, a description of the student demographics, including the percentage of students with special needs, a breakdown of the school's teaching staff, including the percent who are licensed and the status of plans for licensure for staff who are not licensed. And be it further resolved that the charter school review team serve public notice of its meetings along with publication of the review criteria And further resolved that the report of the performance data of each charter school be brought to the board for consideration annually. And be it further resolved that the charter school authorizer report required under Wisconsin statutes 118.40 3M parent F be presented to the board for its consideration. And be it further resolved that the lease terms for the schools who use MPS facilities shall be limited to the terms of the charter school contract. And be it further resolved that an administrative procedure be developed that codifies the steps that will be taken when a charter school closes, which shall include a description of how both district and student and family interests will be protected, and the steps that will be taken to ensure that students will be able to be enrolled elsewhere within the district. And be it further resolved that the model contract shall be revised to include the following provisions. That the discipline procedure of the school shall align with that of MPS and shall include a mechanism for disputes and discipline to be resolved. And that the school, if it is a non-instrumentality charter, agree to provide an annual report that describes its relationships, financial agreements, and any other partnership agreements with any charter management organization in order to ensure that the school's operational and financial transparency. And be it further resolved that all applicable administrative policies and procedures and guidebooks be updated to reflect the above changes.
Thank you very much. Director Carr, do you have any questions or concerns now after hearing that reading?
How do I, if possible, ask for this to be sent back to committee for further review?
Madam Secretary, could you explain how that might be, how that would happen, what would have to happen here tonight?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, that would be through a motion.
Director Carr.
I move to have this sent back to the committee for further review.
So noted.
That's a motion that's been made. Does that need a second?
That does require a second.
Is there a second for that motion?
Can I add something else? And not that I'm not in support, but I just feel like we need to clearly lay this out so that it's more comprehensive.
Okay, that's your rationale. I appreciate that. Is there a second? Director Taylor.
Just clarifying, because there's already a motion on the floor. So the people are listening. If the people on the stage are saying they're confused, those that are listening are as well too. From my understanding, there was already a motion on the floor. So are we circumventing that motion with another motion, or aren't we supposed to dispose of one in some type of form or fashion?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this would be presented as a substitute motion.
Okay, just needed to make sure.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. It still needs a second. Is there a second for this motion?
So that we can move.
Okay.
So noted.
It's been seconded. Director Carr, I know you've mentioned the rationale, but do you want to elaborate at all, or just, no?
This is very important, and with all the strikeouts, and then the provision being removed of the $15 an hour, I just think we need to have something that's clear and concise to present to the community, to the public, before we make any actions moving forward. Nothing more, nothing less. It's confusing in the way that it's written right now.
Are there other comments by members of the committee? Director Simpson.
Thank you, President Peterson. So I'm on the committee that did review this, and I did make the motion to forward it to the full board for the very purpose of making sure that we all had time to look at it, with some additional documents that the board clerk was able to send us that kind of showed other ways of looking at this same information. So we've had a discussion, and we were given additional documents to review just to kind of see, like, is this resolution a good way to go? So I would just I just wanted to state why I would not vote for this to go back to committee, because we already had that conversation. We asked for additional data. It was forwarded to this committee for further discussion. I feel like in terms of it being confusing, I think the only confusion came when strikeouts were made not with the author's permission. So I just feel like, to go back to committee, I'm not sure that it would really change anything that we're looking at this evening. So I just wanted to say that's why I would not be voting in support of sending it back to committee.
Okay, other conversations? Yes, Director Taylor, Vice President Taylor.
Thank you, President Peterson, Chair. Director Seamson just said what I stated as well, too. I think it became confusing when it was uploading with the differences without, I guess, previously checking with the maker of the motion. And because this is something we had already voted on and talked about as well, too, I will not be voting for it to go back to committee, but I do understand how for someone who has not seen it and it happened before they came on the board, it does seem very confusing.
I'm going to ask the Madam Secretary to explain the process by which we have on a regular basis strike-throughs of different resolutions. What's the procedure, please?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, just for clarity for our listening audience and anybody who may be following along with the resolution. So when the resolution is submitted, you'll see that later in tonight's agenda when resolutions are submitted in their original form. And at that time, the resolution is actually referred to a committee for consideration. That referral includes the ability for the administration to conduct an analysis. Once the analysis is complete, the administration then uploads that document with their analysis as their recommendation relative to the resolution. The board member submitting the resolution can always say, as Director O'Halloran has, that I would like the original resolution considered. But the strike-throughs and underlines and things of that nature is a part of the normal process for the administration to demonstrate their analysis to the board, as it is an electronic process.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'm going to pass the. Yeah, I too am going to vote against the motion, but I am going to make one more amendment. It might pass, it might not, but I will stand. I do think we've had enough conversation of this bill at this point, and I know there's going to be continuing conversation about charter schools and our policies based on Director Leonard's resolution, and I'm sure Dr. Speak will continue to have some more conversations. So I'd like to gavel back at this point.
The gavel was passed back.
Any other comments about the motion to send this back to committee, to substitute motion to send it back to committee? Administration.
President Peterson, members of the board, just a point of clarity, the administration, when we went through, just as Dr. Mann said, the idea, we looked for duplicity. We found duplicity, and that's what we brought back and shared. We also said that due to the fact with the Milwaukee Public Schools Charter authorization report that the board requested of us, that you will get an opportunity to take a look at that report, and you will see a number of the things that is asked for here is the reason why we struck through. However, we wanted to make it perfectly clear that the administration is open to do whatever the author of the resolution would like done, but it was our due diligence to give the board our best thinking around the work that has been rendered and that you had requested and to make decisions on, and that information has been forwarded to you.
Thank you very much. Any other comment, Director Leonard?
Just a point of clarification that's really for administration. So you're saying that the strike-throughs is where the duplicity is?
Administration.
Yeah, President Peterson, members of the board, Bridget Shaw, Contracted School Services, that is correct.
Any other comments? Director O'Halloran?
And I will concede, like, I was on the Charter Review Committee, so yes, I am fully aware that we have, during the renewal process, a report of academic, financial, and operational standing of the school. And so I understand, and why that would seem to be duplicative, and I don't want to come off as I'm saying that's, I disagree with that. I understand your standpoint.
Thank you.
I just want to make clear that I would like an annual report of this.
Any other comments? Madam Secretary, could you please take the roll on the substitute motion, excuse me.
On the substitute motion by Director Carr, seconded by Director Taylor, which moves to send this item back to the committee for further analysis. Director Carr.
Nay. So do I just withdraw? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, it sounds as if the author is seeking to withdraw the motion, and with the approval of the seconder, that can be done.
Yes, withdraw.
Okay, so we're back to the original motion. Any other comment? I have a comment, but I'll let other people go first. Director Carr.
Okay, here I go again. Just for clarification, the original one with the strikeout that has been amended, or the amendment from today, is what's going to be submitted for final approval and available to the public, correct?
Right, but it was just passed out to you without.
But I want everybody to say it.
Sure.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the resolution with the resolves and further resolves that's read into the record, originally submitted by Director O'Halloran, removing the provision for the $15 minimum wage requirement and substituting the wording management company for management organization.
Thank you. I'm going to pass the gavel to Vice President Taylor.
Noted.
Gavel pass. Director Peterson.
Yeah, I just have one question. I've had some conversation with Director O'Halloran about this, but I'd like clarification. It's a second further resolved. So it's crossed through. I'll just read. So it's reinstated. It says, further resolved that a report of the performance data of each charter school be brought to the board for consideration annually. Okay, so it's asking for performance data to be brought annually. At the committee meeting, I raised a concern that with 15 or 16 non-instrumentality charter schools, and if we have a conversation about each of their schools on an annual basis, it takes a lot of time away from our attention to the 132 traditional schools that we have. And so I'm curious what Director O'Halloran envisions about what that would be like. And I'm going to provide a alternative that would clarify what I would think would be best, but whatever. It would be that a report of the performance data, and I added, and financial audit of each charter school be sent to the board members and posted online annually, so that any board member has the option to request that said items be placed on a board agenda for review. And in that way, in my perspective, is that would allow board members to put them all on if a board member felt, but it would also perhaps limit the amount of time that we spend discussing non-instrumentality charter schools and give us more time to discuss traditional schools. But I'm open, I'd like to hear from the maker of the motion what their understanding is of what it would mean for us to consider it annually.
Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. So in between the previous meeting and then tonight's meeting, we were provided with several examples of portfolio reports from other municipalities, and some of them had more detail than others. One of them was just kind of a highlight. It went overview, like what's offered at the school and whatnot, and then you had some that were more detailed, similar to the reports that we review at the time of renewal. So I don't necessarily think that we need to go each one individually, but I think having a portfolio where we say, these are all of our charter schools, and here's where we have issues. Because honestly, there are some schools, like at this point, I feel very strong in the ones that we've, since the ones that I've reviewed, but there are some issues. And I think I appreciate that we have processes to monitor these things, but without seeing it in a portfolio, without seeing it, it's harder to track trends and understand exactly what's going on. And like to go back to the point of, from DPI, it's greater accountability for results. And so I'm just trying to ensure public accountability for this. And so I understand that it feels cumbersome to have each one reviewed. Then can we just have once a year, here's a report and let's talk about it. And if it can be a high level, it can go deep dive, but it could say, here are concerns that we should be monitoring. Here are the successes and how can we incorporate those successes into other schools. I don't think it needs to necessarily, I know other directors on the stage refer back to the city's process where they apparently have an 80-page annual audit. I'm not suggesting that, but I think setting aside one night to review some of these trends is, I don't think is too onerous. And I think having this discussion at least once a year, not only grounds us in the data, but it also helps us have an outlet. So we can discuss this once a year and spend the rest of our year talking about the 130 other schools in our district, I guess.
Director Peterson?
Yeah, that sounds good to me, and I appreciate your clarification because the way it's written, it could be interpreted differently. And I guess the other thing is, the way it's written, it only calls for a report on the performance data. It doesn't call for anything on finances. And I guess I'd be interested in the administration's perspective on what could be included in a portfolio, maybe included more than the performance data, but also finance.
Administration?
Chair, Vice President Taylor, and members of the board. I would say we are following best practices with the report that we produce. The 31-page report document that we submit to DPI every year has all of that laid out within that report. And we would ask for any guidance on anything that is missing. You had an opportunity to look at some other reports alongside of our report, our document. And is there things that is different? And we had an opportunity to take a look at the reports, the other reports that you all received as well. And our report logs everything that report logs. It's just a difference of formatting, the way they laid it out. And we will be more than happy to do whatever the board wishes on this. Anything adding further?
Director Peterson, and then I see a couple other hands up, so.
I just say that I'm satisfied. I think the portfolio as defined by Director O'Halloran and the administration is a good way to go. Once a year review, it sounds great.
Okay, thank you. Director O'Halloran and Director Garcia in that order, please. I mean, Director Herndon, sorry, and Director Garcia in that order.
Thank you. I want to ask a question of administration because I think after so many discussions, we've kind of got a little lost. Didn't we pass a resolution or something maybe a year ago or so where we were saying that we needed to start producing an annual report to the board? That's number one. Number two is in this most recent budget, didn't we allocate perhaps 2 additional employees to contract services to perform the annual reporting? I thought that we did because I remember, I think I was allocating more funding to communications and then we discussed the need for contract services to have that more or something. I could be wrong, but I think so. Above and beyond that, though, the driving premise to me behind this is such that at the end of the year, we really should do a quick review. In other words, the board should see it if we never discuss it unless there is an issue, because unless we look at these reports annually or somebody looks at them, how would you know good, bad, or indifferent what's going on with the school? And that's how we got caught a number of years ago, because nobody looks except every 5 years. And that even if administration creates the report, if it's not formally brought to the board, doesn't have to be discussed at all in some instances unless a board member brings it forward, which is what Director Peterson is suggesting.
Administration.
Yes, Vice President Taylor, members of the board, Bridget Chalk, Contracted School Services. So we reproduce a DPI annual report every year, which includes the information that's in the resolution. This is sent to the Office of Board Governance on a regular basis for them to be able to share with the board. In addition, for financial, all of their financial audits are required on an annual basis. Those are reviewed by MPS Audit Services. Those are provided to Office of Board Governance for you to review upon request or be sent to you. As well as we have a performance and compliance audit that's required of all of our charter schools that outlines the compliance that the schools have had in relationship to their contract, as well as the performance that they've had. That is also gets sent to the Office of Board Governance on an annual basis for review and feedback. And so we collaborate in those efforts, and those are available upon your request as well. Thank you.
Vice President Taylor, members of the board, and the last part of the question about additional personnel added to the office, we were not earmarked for any additional personnel. We'll go back and look, but to my understanding, we were not.
Thank you. Director Herndon, any follow up on that? Yeah, wait.
Madam
Director
Chair.
Garcia. Sorry, Madam Clerk.
Chair, members of the board, just for clarity, as stated by Contracted School Services, those reports are submitted to the Office of Board Governance. As the board's business office, we are required to sign off on a lot of reports that are submitted to DPI. Those reports have never been presented publicly for consideration or forwarded to the board. It's such as with our per pupil reports and other things that are required for the board clerk sign off. So I'm understanding this resolution to be a resolution of transparency where you're asking that the report be public. Is that correct?
Yes.
So noted.
Director Garcia and then Director Simpson.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, Madam Secretary, because that was going to be my next point. So from conversations that we had within the SASE meeting, committee meeting, I know that Director O'Halloran, one of the major concerns was how do we get this information out into the public if there's already tools that we're utilizing to categorize and report out on the status, of the different, domains that we're looking at. And it was my understanding that administration would be looking at making those accessible via our website somewhere. So I was just wondering, what was the status on that, and just making sure that for folks that are listening in, that was a big part of the discussion that we had within our committee a couple weeks ago.
Thank you. Administration.
Vice President Taylor and members of the board, the administration will do whatever the board wishes about making it public on the website or whatever the situation may be, whatever we're requested to do. We was doing our due diligence of what was requested of the administration is to provide it to the Office of Board Governance as well as Department of Public Instruction. And we will be more than happy to, if the board's desire, to post it on the website.
Thank you. Director Simpson, and after this, the gavel is being passed back to President Peterson.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. So that idea of transparency, I think, was made very clear by Director Herndon, and then thank you to our Madam Secretary for clarifying that. Reports are there, but I think the point of this is to bring it forward to the board, because unless it's on an agenda item, not all of us have time to go and look at all the reports that are sent. So I think to have it brought forward in a public manner, especially because this is an item that has come up in a multitude of ways. There are a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings around it, and I think to have it come to us in a way so that we can look at reports, have concerns brought forward, have the public have easy access to it, because people look at our agenda items, just makes a lot of sense. So I just want to support Director O'Halloran's original resolution and hope we can vote on it soon.
Yes, thank you. The gavel is being passed back.
So noted.
Right, so I'm going to ask Director O'Halloran just to repeat your vision about the portfolio. I don't think the word portfolio is in here, but, you know, that there'd be just so everybody is clear in terms of what you think would happen on an annual basis.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I was just calling back to the idea of a portfolio. If it's the reports that we're already producing for DPI, just bring those forward for a public discussion so that the public has access to it, so that we talk about it. And frankly, I think a lot of misconceptions can be put to rest through frequent review of data. So that's all I'm hoping for with that. I guess I would ask if that sufficiently clarifies my vision.
Administration?
President Peterson and members of the board, the administration is totally clear on what we are putting out there. So and that is posting as well as a public meeting with the information from this document that will be presented to the board. We are more than happy to do just that.
Excellent. Any other comments by the board? Therefore, Madam Secretary, could you call the roll?
On Director O'Halloran's motion, seconded by Vice President Taylor, to approve Resolution 2122R-001 regarding the charter school program and process, approving the resolution as originally submitted, with removal of the requirement for a $15 an hour minimum wage, and a change to the language of management company to management organization.
Charter.
I'm sorry. Charter management company to charter management organization.
Yes.
On the motion as read into the record, Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor. Aye. And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. President, we now will return to the item that was deferred to the end of the meeting, which is approval of the minutes of the July 2021 regular and special meeting of the board. I would ask, subject to other corrections that board members may have, that the minutes be approved inclusive of the technical amendment made earlier tonight relative to the contracts that were previously approved.
Sure. Do members have any additional corrections to the minutes of our previous meeting, the July meeting? If not, the minutes are approved, inclusive of the technical amendments. Madam Secretary, are there any other items of regular business?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have 2 regular items of business. The first one is a report of the board's delegates, and we have 1 delegate report tonight, and that is the report of the board's delegate to the library board.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. That report is before you. I'm happy to answer questions. I will just say that it's very interesting to see how the 2 organizations are working on very similar topics when it comes to issues of equity and inclusion. And I'm just excited to be able to sit on the board and see, look for ways and opportunities that we can work together. It's a great opportunity.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, what's the next item of regular business?
The next item of regular business is the monthly report of the President of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
And that's before you as well. If there's any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. Madam Secretary, are there any unfinished business?
We have no unfinished business this month.
Madam Secretary, are there any items of new business for referral to committee?
We have no new business for referral.
Madam Secretary, are there any communications for referral to committee?
We have no communications for referral this month.
Madam Secretary, are there any resolutions for referral to
Yes,
committee?
Mr. President, we do have resolutions for referral. The first resolution is 2122R-11 by Director Simpson on evaluation of the budget process. Yes, that would be the resolution.
Okay, and we're going to refer that to the Committee on Strategic Planning and Budget. What is the next resolution for
The next
referral?
resolution is Resolution 2122R-12 by Director Carr on a waiver of student fees.
We're going to refer that to the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. What is the next resolution for referral?
The next resolution is Resolution 2122R-13 by Director Carr on hazard pay for secretaries.
We will refer that to the Committee of Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Madam Secretary, we're on a roll. What's the next item, please?
Mr. Chair, that was the last item on tonight's agenda.
There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned.